So hi everyone, a lot of light on my face, but so this is electric vehicle charging infrastructure working group, and I'm just going to talk about give you an update on this. So who am I? So I'm a PhD student, just enrolled for my 4th year, and typically working on the electric vehicle charging infrastructure as my topic. And I am also a civil engineer by background. I work as a consultant for Coventry City Council, and I'm a senior program manager. So I've got projects like the EV charging infrastructure strategy and everything to do with the charging infrastructure that's been installed in Coventry so far, along with all electric bus city as the project, because I hope, it's been in the news enough that Coventry is going to be all electric bus city by end of 2025. And I work also on projects like renewable energy and battery storage. I am also chair of obviously the working group here, but I'm also chair of IET Public Sector EVI Charging Ahead Committee. So that's a lot of chairs. So EV charging infrastructure update. So we agreed, so it started back in 2021. So we ended up meeting in September 21, and we had a mandate to sort of produce a startup guide for the rollout of charging infrastructure for local authorities. And we sort of made a slow start, but we officially launched it in November last year. And it is available on the TTF website. And then we wanted to understand what we should be doing next. So a 2023 roadmap. So identified 4 pillars or 4 components for the rollout of infrastructure. So we did the starter guide, as in what should be considered by a local authority officer who is looking at starting this journey. But now identify the actual components, and we carried out a survey. So LCRIG actually did that, asking local authorities what the 4 essential components of the charging infrastructure they would like to see, what order they would like to see these developed. And what came out was they would like to see procurement first, then site selection, then consult, how you would consult, and then the delivery. So what I'm going to do is sort of quickly run you through Coventry as a case study, and why, in a way, Coventry is placed in a good position to lead on this. So in the West Midlands, you can see where Coventry is at as far as availability of charging infrastructure is concerned. We have roughly over 900 chargers available. They are chargers, but as far as spaces are concerned, we have over 1,000 spaces now available. And what does that look like then in Coventry? So this is sort of just a quick snapshot of how they are distributed. They are different capacity chargers, and they are more sort of, just quick background on Coventry. So it's a very compact urban city. We have about just over 364,000 people, but we also have over 46% of properties that don't have off-street parking facility. So we do need to make sure that those properties are on the same page as properties that do have off-street parking facility and are able to charge where they live. So from that survey, and the first element that we wanted to develop was going to be procurement. And Coventry has taken advantage of OZEV grant quite extensively, which we sort of started this journey with the grant back in 2016, which OZEV was OLEV then. And we have sort of, now we know a lot more than we did then, but we started on our journey with the ULEV taxi infrastructure project. So, which was the opportunity charging. We sort of installed 39 rapid chargers under that. So basically, from a procurement perspective, there are 4 contracts that are in operation in Coventry. I manage all the 4 contracts. We have 3 charge point operators. So the opportunity charging, which is am I not on the right? So this is what happens when you've got 2 screens in front of you. So I'm looking at a different screen. Sorry. There we are. So ESB are charge point operators for opportunity charging. I then also have a contract that is for on-street residential charge points with 2 charge point operators. One is Chargy and Connected Curb. Connected Curb have 1-2 contracts. So although I've got 4, 2 of them are with Connected Curb and 1 is with Chargy and 1 is with ESB. We have also, so in 2019, it was sort of quite new, and so small businesses, SMEs were, their fleet transition, or their staff, their business transitioning to EVs was quite new. And one of the things we wanted to do was give them some confidence as to, who they should, which charge point operator they should go with. And we carried out a procurement exercise so that they have got that confidence that it is vetted by a local authority. And we ended up into a agreement with EO Charging through this open tender process. And one of the things we wanted was a dedicated website that will allow SMEs to find information, and we created a plugincoventry.org website where you've got plugincoventry.org, and you've got a form on there where the SMEs can go and fill in and get somebody to come and investigate and give them opportunities and options on how or what fits their business. So one of the things that on-street charging is concerned is the parking. And one of the things also I wanted to mention was the PAS 1899 compliancy, which is again quite new. It is difficult to have PAS 1899 compliant spaces when you are working with existing infrastructure, So what we've got is charging bays that look like this. This is the rapid chargers that we have in Coventry. Again, very old model. We started installing this back in 2018. We have a good, the KPIs are still very, very good. These are what the residential charge points look like. They look like bollards. They are very much, from a street furniture perspective, they blend in quite nicely with existing street furniture, and they are not very intrusive. One of the things is that these are for residents who live in the area. So they know they are there, and they are not typically for passing traffic so much. And we have used our Plug-in Coventry agreement to procure or purchase, if you like, the chargers, and have these chargers installed in our car parks. It's a very innovative solution here. Parking spaces in car parks are very much at premium again, so we've suspended posts from the ceiling, and then we've installed those chargers on there. So when we are developing these procurement, site selection, consultation and delivery sort of templates and frameworks, they are going to be similar type to the starter guides, very concise, very to the point. It's more on providing what considerations should be made when you are doing and looking at or developing any of these components. So from a site selection perspective, what do you look for? You would sort of look at identifying, this is about orgs, okay? So there are two types, funding from central government, funding from private sector, funding from the city council itself. And funding is always a sort of challenge. I know charge point operators are providing fully funded models, but quite often they tend to be in sort of commercially viable locations. But as an authority, you do need to provide them at locations where, commercially it's probably not viable. And this is where the local government, central government funding comes into play. So when these are just some consideration, absolutely not all of them. So one of the things what we found, again, like I said, we started back in 2018 with this journey. We did use lamppost and wanted to provide chargers in front of people's houses, like the front doors. Got really bad pushback on that. So we should, so going forward, so not in front of somebody's house, front door, if you like. Again, try to look, identify near lighting columns. If lighting column is what you are going to look for as a source for the power supply. Lots of underground infrastructure in the footpath, width of the footpath, width of the road, sort of not near trees. So these are just some considerations that you need to look for when you're looking at site selection. And it's usually when you've got something like this is a typical area in Coventry where many streets like these, where terrace property streets, on-street parking, and then you're looking at gable ends, where there is hedgerows or fencing, where providing charging bollards or charging infrastructure is not so contentious. Parking spaces on these kind of streets are at premium. Again, when you start looking at TROs on these spaces, they are definitely another challenge for something like this. The second bit would be the third bit is consultation. Again, consultation has two strands from a local authority perspective. You've got internal consultation and external consultation. You would look 100% as soon as you've identified your locations, you must engage with your local distribution network operator before you go and consult any local residents, councillors or anybody, because you could consult with them, they could be on board, then to find out that you haven't got power supply there, or it is not possible to get a supply and that particular location is not viable. So first, definitely consultation with the local DNO. Obviously, all these listed here are, I think people from local authority will be quite familiar with. And this is the external consultation with the residents. What does that look like? So we've typically employed a residence parking permit scheme or residence parking permit zone principles. And that's what that plan shows on the right-hand side. And I'm just going to go quickly through the local authority timeline. Again, the reason I've got all these different slides is that when this slide deck is made available, particularly to local authority officers, they will be able to go through at their leisure, see all the processes that have been listed, and probably relate to it. And if something doesn't make sense, at least something will be brought to their mind to remind what different processes that they should be considering. So these are roughly timelines on what from a local authority perspective, what the timeline looks like. But this does assume, as it says, that relevant approvals are in place. What I mean by that is reports and cabinet approval and so forth. I'm also assuming that your procurement is taken place. Again, in procurement, there are you could have separate civil engineer, civils contract, separate charge per operator contract, or you could have both in one, or you could have a charge per operator who is providing your civils work or a turnkey solution. Now, enforcement and monitoring. I'm quite sure Sarah mentioned earlier on this morning about parking costs, paying for parking and paying for charging as one or separate. So in Coventry, they are separate. It is like, it's more about, you don't mix both of them together. So we have TROs, we have experimental TROs, we have definitely used experimental TRO process when we did the rapid chargers, installation of rapid chargers, mainly because we wanted to make sure that the enforcement is straight away and not wait, but that allows you under ETRO 6 months of consultation process, which does work quite nicely in the sense that what are the restrictions you are trying to provide? Is it, 1 hour no return within 2 hours, or is it 2 hours no return within? So that is a consultation that you are undertaking as part of that 6-month period, rather than, is this the location? Are you happy with the location? Because you've already done the consultation with the residents, and if you've got objections, don't use that location, change it. That's what we found does work. So what do the ETROs look like? What is the timeline for it as well? It's there on the side. This is roughly what we've got in Coventry at the moment. So you can see pay and display machine, there is a sign for that, and there is a separate sign for EV charging. One of the things we've also done in Coventry is we've installed sensors in the parking bays, and that is typically to make sure that we are able to enforce when the TROs are in place. As part of the procurement and tender process, there was a requirement that the sensors back office have integrated with the charge point operator's back office. And then the onus is on the charge point operator that they then notify the City Council's parking services that there is a contravention taking place or not. And that we've used Appyway parking. So Coventry has a lot of presence with Appyway. And the Chargy are operating this system, and so are Connected Curb. Very, very quickly, a couple of slides on installation and challenges. So this is Connected Curbs. So their model works on having a box underground with all the electronics, and then they install like a socket above ground. So if there is a incident and the bollard is knocked off, it has no impact on the electronics. They just come and change the bollard. But there are challenges. So this is basically showing a clear area behind the curbs, whereas you can see we've got ducting over there. It was like it's a no-no, but spaces are not that easy to find to begin with. With all the consultation and everything, and we can't go and continuously keep doing trial holes to find out if it's okay or not. So you do come across a situation like that, and then the solution was that we had a null socket installed, which can be installed in between these existing ducts, and the last one image shows what that null socket looks like, and then we installed the charging bollard above that, and their node box behind in the footpath. So these are just a few things that that Coventry has done. I think the Q&A side of it, I think I would like to do the Q&A right at the end. I've got two more speakers. I've got Christina from OZEV, who will come and talk about what they are doing. And after Christina, we've got Tim from Cenex, and he will talk about their involvement in this space. Christina?
There we go. Hello everyone. I'm Christina Stathakopoulou, and I work in the Office for Zero Emission Vehicles within the Department for Transport. I head up the Programme Management Office for one of our flagship programmes, which is LEVI, the Local Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Fund. I'm going to talk to you today about LEVI and what else government's doing in this space as well. So a bit of context first. Around a quarter of UK emissions come from transport, and within that, cars and taxis make up about half of that. So obviously it's quite essential that we tackle that in order to meet net zero and our decarbonisation targets. So that's why government in 2021 published the Transport Decarbonisation Plan and Strategy, setting out a range of measures the government's taking to address transport emissions. And here you can see some of our progress in delivering this plan. So the key announcement that I'm sure you're all aware of is the zero emissions mandate. So that's phasing out all petrol and diesel vehicles from 2030 onwards. And a lot of regulations have already been announced as to how we're going to do this and to ensure that we can achieve that. The graph shows the total of BEVs, so that's battery electric vehicles. Unfortunately, the data's lagging a little bit behind, but I still think it does a good job of demonstrating how much growth we're seeing in this area. And it's critical that if we're getting more BEVs, we need to have the charging infrastructure available to support those vehicles. And as of March 2023, there were over 40,000 public charge points available in the UK. And over the next 7 years, so to 2030, we are hoping to see an almost tenfold increase in that space. And because government loves a strategy, we've published the EV infrastructure strategy to support the successful ZEV transition. There are a lot of elements to the strategy, but the two that I wanted to pick out were the first one, that we want everyone to be able to find and access reliable public charge points regardless of where they live. So across the UK, about a third of households don't have off-street parking. So it's very important that we ensure that those drivers also have access to charging infrastructure. And secondly, I'd like to pull out that we want this to be primarily a market-led rollout, but as Shamala alluded to earlier, we can't do that completely. There are some areas that are less commercial. So government recognises that there are some areas that we do need to intervene in. So firstly, consumer experience. There are regulations that have been consulted on and that are coming into effect on consumer experience to address the issues that charge points can be unreliable and difficult to use. And then if we skip over to the third one, government's also investing almost £1 billion to upgrade our power networks and ensure that motorway service areas and A roads have the charging provision that they need to avoid issues like you might have seen in the news over Christmas of people queuing up to use charging infrastructure at motorway service areas. So the rest of this slot, I'm going to focus on that second one, which is the pace of rollout in the local on-street charging infrastructure area. So what's our vision? We want everyone to be able to find and access reliable public charge points, regardless of where they might live. And what do we need to do to achieve that? So in the next 7 years, so from now to 2030, we want to go from 40,000 public charge points that are available now to, at a minimum, 280,000. We also want to address the high regional disparity that currently exists, as you can see on the map on the right-hand side, to make sure that there's equitable regional access for all drivers across the country. And also, we want to make sure that local authorities have the resources they need to be able to have the dedicated EV resource they need to know where to put the charge points and to actually get plans in place to install them. So we have two main funding schemes to address these challenges. So on the 30th of March, we announced the LEVI scheme. So that's the Local Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Fund. We announced 343 million for the installation of charge points and 37.8 million for capability funding for local authorities. This is for them to secure dedicated staff. This follows on from the LEVI pilot that we had started in 22-23, where we awarded 31 million of public funding to 25 local authorities to deliver 3,000 charge points and 1,000 gullies as well. And at the same time, we also awarded 8 million of upfront resource funding to get that kick-started and getting the secured staff in place. We also have the existing AUX scheme, so the on-street residential charge point scheme that Shamala referred to. That's been going since about 2017, but we've announced that it will continue to operate in 2023-24. And we've got around 4,000 charge points already installed, with about 10,000 in the pipeline. So turning to focus on LEVI, the key objectives are delivering a step change in the scale of deployment of local, low-power on-street charging across England, and accelerating the commercialisation and investment in the local charging infrastructure sector. So the second point is really important. We want to see more and more private investment coming into this area. And there are three offerings within the scheme. So we've got the capital funding, which is to actually install the charge points. We've got the capability funding, which I mentioned, to get the EV officers into place. And we also have the offering of the LEVI support body. So the support body are our delivery partners, and they are well placed to provide tools, training, and sharing of best practice with local authorities. So under LEVI, we're allocating funding across Tier 1 authorities in England. And I wanted to draw out a couple of differences with AUKS that's already been ongoing for quite a few years. So the first one's that it's allocated funding, so it's not competed. We're doing that to ensure no areas get left behind and they have a ring-fenced amount that they can apply for. And the second change is that we are allocating this to Tier 1 local authorities, so your unitary, county council or combined authorities. The rationale here is to deliver scale, and by working across larger areas, we hope to see those economies of scale and private investment come in. And we also want a strategic rollout across areas. We do, however, expect the Tier 1 authorities to work with their constituent authorities, and in the LEVI applications, we do ask to see evidence of that as well. So we announced the LEVI fund on the 30th of March, and between then and the 26th of May, we've asked all local authorities to provide us with their expressions of interest. Each local authority has been told how much funding is available to them. So yeah, we're waiting back for the expressions of interest. This is to gather some initial intel to inform our further engagement. And in those EOIs, we're asking local authorities to let us know if they want to be in tranche 1 or tranche 2 of the LEVI programme. So tranche 1 will be going on this year, so they'll get their funding in financial year 23-24. But if they're in tranche 2, it will be the following year, so in 24-25. For local authorities that are in tranche 1, they then have a deadline of 17th of November to get their full applications in, so their tender documents, criteria compliance, and a brief business case. And once the support body and DFT assess that and confirm that it meets the LEVI criteria, we will at that point release 90% of the funding to those authorities. The last 10% will be released after a contract review. So we want to look at the contracts just to make sure that they're still meeting those LEVI conditions, and then we will release the final 10%. And here you can see what makes a good LEVI bid. So the bids need to show that they meet the LEVI objectives, so to primarily offer low power and on-street charging. But as with the pilot, there is a degree of flexibility, so we can have some rapid chargers as part of that bid, or other technologies like gullies. And that would be fine. We want to see good evidence of project planning and engagement, so collaboration with the constituent authorities, but also with the market, and high level of private investment. The full LEVI conditions and also the EOI forms can be found both on the DFT website or on the Energy Saving Trust website, Energy Saving Trust being one of the 3 members of our support body. And as mentioned, we do have an extensive offering through the support body, but I won't touch on that here because I think that's what Tim is going to talk to you about. And finally, on the existing scheme, the on-street residential charge point scheme, that is continuing this year, but we've made some changes just to make sure that it's complementary to the LEVI fund. AUKS is available to the whole of the UK, not just England like LEVI is, and it provides up to 50% of capital costs, so for the infrastructure only, and it can now be put towards car clubs. So I will finish there and hand over to Tim.
Hi, I'm Tim Gale. I am an Assistant Infrastructure Strategy Consultant at Cenex, and I'm here to give a bit of an update on what we're doing as part of the LEVI support body. As part of this, I've included some contextual information, so I'll kind of skate through that a little bit. But really, what we're talking about when we're talking about electric vehicle infrastructure is about decarbonising, improving air quality, and there's reasons why. So we've got a backdrop of global, national and local challenges, including a 1.5 degree warming limit, which is seriously under threat. It's entirely likely that we will go over that, and that will be a real problem if we do. We've also got issues in this country around surface transport, which is the highest emitting UK sector for CO2 emissions. But CO2 is not the only part. So we've also got problems with air quality. Thousands of people dying every year as a result of poor air quality. So one solution is electric vehicles. It's not the only solution, but one solution is electric vehicles. We can see that electric vehicles are growing. This was covered by Joseph, obviously, but these are SMMT figures, and our highest ever BEV registration month was last month, March 2023, with 46,000. It's growing and growing and growing. And how do you charge them? That's the problem. Reports, I see them in the newspaper almost every day about issues with EV charging infrastructure. Whether or not they're actually as big as the newspapers report is a different matter, but they're there. Lots and lots of newspapers talking about why EVs aren't going to work, why we need thousands more charge points, why we're going to fail to deliver. It's an issue. Now, this EV infrastructure comes in many shapes and sizes. A lot of us will be familiar with the standard pedestal charge point, but what about pavement channels and lamppost charge points, pop-up charge points, residential rapid charge points, and even things like wireless charging technologies? That's Nottingham. Very proud of that. So the challenge here is delivery. Now, this is some excellent alliteration that I cannot take any, I can't even think of how to phrase it. This was all my boss, but it's excellent. So really what we're aiming for is getting high quality charge points delivered in the right place, in the right number, and the right type. And then the key thing is the commercial arrangements. So making sure that local authorities are getting a good deal out of it, but that the private sector companies will want to invest. This challenge is obviously complex, and the government is delivering through the LEVI Capital Fund, which I feel like we might have copied off each other's homework a little bit here. £340 million of capital funding, really aiming at delivering charge points for those 30% of residents without off-street parking. This is very important. This is a key point of delivery. But how do you deliver those? You have to improve capability, which is where the LEVI capability funding comes in. So this was £8 million allocated in February, and then the subsequent £37 million, so up to £45 million across the 3 financial years, 22-23, 23-24, and 24-25. And this is about upskilling local authorities. Now, LEVI delivery has already begun. We had the pilot in August 22, which was £10 million of funding. It was 10 local authorities, and it was about 1,000 charge points, but that was expanded in February 23 to include 16 new pilots. 3 of the originals were expanded, an extra £22 million of funding. I appear to have 100 gullies rather than 1,000 gullies. That's my mistake. And allocations available to every Tier 1 authority. So obviously there's a lot of money there, but it's all about upskilling. This is where we come in as the support body, and you may recognise this slide as well. Really, in the support body, our aim is to provide advice, provide information, provide tools that local authorities can use to deliver these charge points. So this is insights, this is advice, yes, but these are specific things that we have developed. So the Insights Toolkit, this is a toolkit of projections that it's quantitative data for LAs to say this is how many charge points you're going to need. Then you've got the knowledge repository, which is a repository of all of our knowledge in our company to say, actually, what do we know about installing EV charge points all the way through from start to finish. And then opportunities for networking. So the Energy Saving Trust has run the local government support program for a while, as you can see. And we're trying to increase these opportunities for local authorities to network. And then we are also running road shows, so traveling around the country, talking about electric vehicle infrastructure and how to implement it. So this goes on to the Nevis Insights Toolkit. This has been built by a couple of my colleagues who are extremely talented. What they've done is they have taken all of our knowledge and our information that we've gleaned over the years we've been operating, and we have modelled actual real numbers for growth in EV and using things like the SMMT curves for the vehicle park so that we can understand how the vehicle park will grow or not over the next 20 years, even in fact up to 2050, and then translated that into a real number of charge points. So what you can see in this top graph is that is the total number of charge points we project in the UK between now and 2050 will be needed. And that is color coded. So the bottom large section is 7 kilowatts, and then 22, 50, 150. So you can see that the lion's share are 7 kilowatt units for people to charge at or near home or near work. And then the bottom graph you can see is modelled air quality improvements as a result of the installation of those charge points and the move to EV. As that is specifically NOx, you can see quite a significant dip. That was due to COVID, but it's modelled based on actual knowledge of how the emissions from vehicles and from generating electricity as well, and models an improvement in the carbon of the grid, the electricity grid over time as well. You can see there's other things that we also account for, so EV uptake, other CO2 impact, and then we actually also model and graph mitigated damage costs, so to say actually how much realistically would you save by reducing these emissions, and some inputs for outline business cases, including some costings. This toolkit is supported by our knowledge repository, which is really aimed at building the capacity, the capability of local authority officers. So we want to take you through the process and upskill everyone so that they can understand how to install and run a successful charging network. It's not, it will never be complete, but our aim is to basically try and take you through each step of the way. So we go through a journey on installing EV infrastructure. So from just starting out, you want to find out about the vehicles or the charging connectors or why the powers are a certain, why it's 7 kilowatts and 150 kilowatts, all the way through things like procurement, which can be an absolute quagmire, through to operating a successful network, and what do you do when you come to the end of your contract. In terms of contracts, our procurement section has recently grown as we've deployed our concession heads of terms. So this is a document for local authority officers which covers 32 important clauses with the aim of cutting out early negotiation and giving a structure for local authorities to follow. These were shaped by the public procurement industry, and they have integrated feedback from local authorities and the private sector. And the aim of this is really to reduce uncertainty during negotiations between the private sector and local authorities. It takes you through everything from things like the terms of how long the contract should be, when you can break the contract off, technical specifications. We're not giving specifics necessarily, but guidance on how do you write this, how do you consider this, and then all the way through to exit strategies at the end of the contract. This is also supported by our support body roadshows. So there is one tomorrow. I assume most of you will be here, so won't be able to attend. But tomorrow's roadshow we will be having speakers come and talk about things like charge point accessibility. So Motability are coming to speak about PAS 1899. Flush fitting charge points. So we've got a variety of companies coming and talking about their proposition, as well as one of our Cenex specialists talking about something a little bit different. So council fleet decarbonisation, as well as going through this heads of terms document. All of this content will be recorded and will be uploaded to the knowledge repository. And in fact, the previous 2 roadshows have also been. And they covered topics like what EV drivers want based on EVA England, things like micromobility as well. So again, a little bit different, but saying, have you considered this, and hydrogen as well as like ownership models, local authority resourcing, and some charge point safety. So we have covered an awful lot of topics, and all of those recordings are also available on our knowledge repository, which is available to all English local authorities. Speaking of the roadshows, our roadshow 4 is the 29th of June 2023 in Guildford. So if anyone wants to sign up at nevis.cenex.co.uk, as long as you're a local authority officer, it's specifically only for local authority officers, then you would be very welcome to join us then. Thank you very much for listening. I'm happy to take questions, but I'm aware we're limited on time.